Hello and welcome to a new episode of Bite-Sized Book History. I'm your host, Allie Alvis. You might be more familiar with me from my social media handle at Book Historia. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Being a librarian/book historian means being familiar with a lot of diverse terms for books. One such term is cute. Although John Carter's ABC for Book Collectors does not list it in its pages, it's an undeniable truth that some books are just adorable. And to me, there is no book as adorable as a miniature book. Smallness has long been a desired trait for containers of information. It all has to do with efficiency and ease of use. Some scholars count tiny Mesopotamian cuneiform clay tablets as the world's first miniature books. Moving on to the codex form, many miniature religious manuscripts survive from the Middle Ages. These ranged from the relatively cheap pocket Bibles for the friar or scholar on the go, to sumptuous little gems like this Book of Hours, which almost fits into the palm of my hand. In the last episode of Bite-Sized Book History, I talked about movable metal type. Now imagine type pieces so small that you had to set them with tweezers, and then imagine having to fold a printed page down and down and down into a miniature book. But never ones to back down from a challenge, printers produced miniature books from the early days of the print technology in the West. In this period, the most popular genres of miniature books, and really up through the 19th century, the most popular genres were religious and almanacs, both of which are important to have on you at all times in case you need to make quick reference of it. As an example, here is a little 16th century miniature French psalm and song book. This would have been carried on a worshiper to a church service. Here's the title page. And it contains the text of the psalms as well as the tunes for the music. That way you wouldn't have to improvise or mimic singing along when you actually had the music right in front of you. To avoid the eye strain of having to typeset a miniature book, some publishers and printers had them engraved instead. Miniature almanacs from the 18th century, like these, were most often engraved. Although this printing shortcut is not obvious at first glance, it sure is when you turn the page and find a blank. Until the 20th century, miniature almanacs like these were the most widely produced miniature book. This is, of course, owing to their annual nature. And when they went out of date, what could you do with them? Well, you could give them to your kids. This little well-loved almanac, you can see it's got quite a bit of wear on it, was published in 1753. Here is its first little opening page. And after 1753, it passed into the possession of a band of children. You can see they all filled out their names on these blank pages which come in between the engraved pages. The kids added all sorts of fun little doodles and even possibly self-portraits of themselves in this little book. In the 18th century, the concept of children's literature was still being defined. But the idea of tiny books for tiny hands was awfully popular. Some scholars call the 19th century the supreme age of the miniature book. As normal-sized books became cheaper to manufacture in the 19th century, so did their tiny counterparts. This period saw a diversification of genres printed in miniature. No longer just the domain of almanacs and religious books, the format opened its doors wide to genres like literature and travel guides and histories and all sorts of different types of books. As photographic technology developed during the 19th century, those questing to produce the world's smallest book took advantage of it. The firm of David Bryce & Son, based in Glasgow, was one such group trying to make tiny books. In pursuit of profits, the Son part of the David Bryce & Son, also named David Bryce, took them into the miniature book publishing business. Using the new technology of photolithography, which is part photography, part engraving, David was able to produce a miniature of what he called a mother book. Basically, it was a reduction of a normal-sized book while retaining the normal-sized book's clarity and fidelity. So theoretically, this book could still be read, even though it was very small. Thanks to connections with Oxford University Press and publishing magnate Arthur Pearson, Bryce's line of miniature books became extremely popular. So popular, in fact, that they gave rise to a bit of a myth that needs to be busted. The story goes that 500,000 of Bryce's miniature Qur'ans were printed and distributed to Muslim soldiers in the British Army during World War I. While these miniature Qur'ans were indeed distributed to Muslim soldiers in hospitals, there is no evidence that there was an official distribution effort on behalf of the British Army. For more information on this specific topic, check out Libby Melzer's article in my works cited below. At some point in the 19th century, form began to outweigh function of miniature books. Despite Bryce's efforts to make sure their books could be read, some of their photolithographic reproductions are so tiny you cannot read them with the naked eye. 21st century technology has enabled the production of unimaginably small books. The current record holder for world's smallest book is the 2007 Teeny Ted from Turnip Town, which measures 100 micrometers by 70 micrometers and requires a scanning electron microscope to read. Miniature books make for great collecting because, as we mentioned, they don't take up much room. Indiana University's Lilly Library holds the largest collection of miniature books in the U.S., clocking in at over 16,000 items. And, as you may guess, I am far from the only one who is desperately in love with these tiny books. There's actually a whole society dedicated to the love of miniature books. In fact, I've kind of played fast and loose with the definition of miniature in this video. But the Miniature Book Society's official definition of miniature says that miniature books cannot be over 3 inches in height. Or 4 inches if you're in the UK, which I'm not quite sure why there's a difference there, but perhaps I should join the society and find out. If you can't get enough of these miniature books, check out the MiniatureMonday and Tiny Tuesday hashtags on Instagram. They're full of some of the most adorable books you will ever see. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Before you go, just a reminder, don't bite your books, particularly the little ones. See you next time.